Are you ready to make the most of your oil and gas mineral rights? Welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. Get the knowledge and resources you need to manage your minerals and royalties. Here is your host, Matt Sands.
Hello and welcome to the Mineral Rights Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Sands, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Williams, and we're here to help you make the most of your minerals and royalties. And in this episode, we're going to answer more of your listener questions. Justin, it's February 2025. We're making our way through the list of questions, and we had some really different questions this time. I know we say that a lot, but this time there were some very nuanced questions covering almost every state that has a major oil and gas presence. So it's definitely a good one.
No, you said it, Matt. And these are not just the what do I do questions, but the typical things that a lot of people encounter, but it gets complicated fast. And we always say that every situation is unique, and every one of these questions speaks to that.
Absolutely. Well, do you want to go ahead and dive into the first one here?
Let's do it. So this first one here is, Matt, I have a question I'm struggling with, and per your email below, thought you may be able to help me with it. I have a mineral interest in North Dakota. The oil and gas lease that the mineral interest is subject to has a clause that prohibits the deduction of post-production costs. The operator of the wells covered by the mineral interest has ignored and not responded to requests I have made in writing to reimburse me for the deductions taken contrary to the lease terms and to discontinue the deductions going forward. The operator of the interest has changed several times over the years. Recently, the latest operator has agreed to reimburse me for the deductions taken, but only for the time period the new operator has owned the wells. The wells have been producing for several years prior to the new operator's ownership. The oil and gas lease provides that the lessee, its successors, and assigns are bound by the terms and conditions of the oil and gas lease. Is the new operator obligated to reimburse me for deductions taken contrary to the lease agreement for the term of the agreement, of course, provided the statute of limitations hasn't run out? Or can the new operator limit its liability and only reimburse me for the time period it owned the oil and gas lease? And so, Matt, to make this a little bit more simple for folks, it is not uncommon for oil and gas assets to change hands quite often. And it's not uncommon for there to be post-deduction issues. Maybe they took too much for transport. Maybe the lease has certain terms and they missed it. But the question becomes, does the operator who owns it now, do they owe me that what should be paid back for the term that they owned it? Or do they owe me for everybody who owned it before?
Yeah, this is definitely a technical legal question. So, first of all, let me preface what we're going to talk about by saying that Justin and I are not attorneys. This information should not be construed as legal advice. This is just for informational purposes only. So, first order of business, Julie, is to contact an attorney that's licensed to practice in North Dakota and give them a copy of your oil and gas lease to get advice specific to your situation. You have to look at that full lease, understand the terms, exactly what may or may not be deducted, and that'll dictate what your rights are. And per your earlier point, to request the interest on the underpaid royalties, that's another thing that you ought to look into, is if they shouldn't have deducted those and they did, paying you the amount that they owed is one part, but then also you ought to talk with your attorney to see if you might be owed interest on those payments that were late effectively. So, that's something working through your attorney to do. And then, again, statute of limitations wise, I think it may be 10 years for North Dakota, but again, check with your attorney. And so, dependent on the actual time period when that well was drilled and when that started producing, or whatever the time period is in your case, that would qualify as the statute of limitations. That would be the time period, like you mentioned, that you would be owed those funds. Beyond that, you've sort of missed out on that opportunity, is my general understanding. But again, what you're describing is a very common situation. Like Justin mentioned, these wells change hands multiple times over their life, and you'll have to probably go back to each of those operators that had a hand in it over that time period and then make that request, again, within that statute of limitations time period. So if there are 3 operators, again, check with your attorney. They'll give you advice, and it may be contrary to what I'm telling you right now. But what I would do if I were in your shoes is that you've gotten paid by the latest operator. I would go back in that chain of title and find out who the other operators are, contact their owner relations department, explain the situation, give them copies of your leases, the well information, previous owner numbers, and ask for payment of that. And another thing I would do is contact the North Dakota Royalty Oversight Program. This is an ombudsman program that works with royalty owners and operators to provide assistance with royalty payment issues like yours. So that would be kind of in parallel to going with your attorney and doing all those things. I would go to that North Dakota Royalty Owners Oversight Program, and we'll have a link in the show notes where you can go to that and fill out an inquiry. And that's a great way because they have established relationships with all the operators that are in North Dakota. They can help shortcut to the people that need to get involved to get you help. And, that might be one way to also get some resolution to this. So again, good luck. Again, this shouldn't be construed as legal advice, but these are the things that I would do. And then if you need help with a form letter to at least start down the path, I have one that you can download. In the show notes, we'll link to that. It's written for contacting your operator about later missing royalty payments, and you can edit it, tweak it for your use in your specific situation. But I hope that helps, Julie. Justin, anything else to add there?
The only thing I think I would add, Matt, is, often in these situations, it becomes cost versus potential reward situation. If you go down the road working with an attorney, you may reach a certain point in the past where the money that you're owed just doesn't make sense for what it would cost to have the attorney chase it. And so that's something to think about as well as you go through this. There is no shame, no foul in taking those first steps yourself, but keep that in mind as you go down this road. And kudos to you for getting your current operator on the hook for those and to take care of those, because that's something that a lot of people don't get.
Yeah, they totally miss it. No, that's a great point and good practical advice there. Okay, Justin, our next question here is from Tom. He says, "Hi, Matt, you have some great podcasts and your knowledge is outrageously good." Well, thank you, Tom, for that. I have 2 questions and I hope you would be so kind to help me with. I have some mineral rights on some Illinois farmland. The current landowner has mineral rights as well. If an oil lease is offered to both of us and I agree to mine and sign it, does the landowner have to sign his lease for drilling to occur? In other words, does a landowner have the power to not allow drilling on his land, whether other mineral owners would like drilling to occur or not? And the next one is, as a mineral owner, is there a way that I can learn who all of the other mineral rights owners are on the same property? So those are some great questions, Justin. Do you want to take a shot?
Yeah, you said it, man. Yeah, those are the very common questions. And, it depends on the percentage of minerals owned and the number of acres. So statutory pooling in many states allows operators to get approval to drill wells, even without 100% of the minerals being leased. They typically need a majority of the owners to lease, but can force pool the remainder. It's important in the scenario, like you mentioned, but also when, you've got deceased mineral owners and their heirs are unknown, or they can't be located, it prevents one owner or other absentee owners from blocking the development. And Matt, that's more the intent with the statutory pooling. We've heard many times before where landowners can certainly cause a stink, but there are precedents set that certain owners cannot prevent the other owners from getting the benefit on their lands. And that can vary depending on the state, certainly something to talk to an attorney about. It sounds like in your scenario, you may not know who the other actual mineral right owners are, but if you know who that landowner is, you could have a conversation with him and see how he feels about it. The other mineral rights owners, Matt, and you might be able to speak to this more, I believe that the other mineral right owners would have more of a chance of holding the development up than likely the landowner would, but you might know better.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think in this case, since you say the landowner, the surface rights owner, I take that to mean also owns a portion of the mineral rights. I think it depends on the specifics, right? So like Justin mentioned, statutory pooling in general, they require about, 50% or 60%. They have some threshold of the amount of minerals that need to be leased in order to force pool the remainder. And that's an important concept, this whole statutory pooling and forced pooling, because like Justin mentioned, is that in this scenario, you have one mineral owner that says, no, I don't want to sign a lease. Without statutory pooling, it could block the development of those minerals. And so with statutory pooling, it allows, if the majority say we've leased, we want development to occur, it's a mechanism that ensures that there's, sort of a third party, which is the State Oil and Gas Commission, that can look at the application and say, yeah, they went through all the proper steps. They have the required number of people. We're going to force pool the remainder. They'll get the statutory minimum royalty, plus they'll back into a non-operated working interest, oftentimes is how it's structured. And so that they'll get their portion, but then there's a penalty for them not signing a lease and for the operator having to carry their interests. And so that's an important concept. But then also, practically speaking, many of these interests have been handed down for generations. They've been fractionated and keep getting split up and smaller over time. So it's not uncommon for there to be hundreds of mineral interest owners in one pooled unit. And many of those people don't have marketable title to the interest. In other words, their ancestors that have passed away years ago, before any sort of oil and gas development occurred, never deeded the interest over to their heirs, or maybe there aren't any heirs, so there's like this gap in like who owns the minerals. We can't contact them. You'll be surprised at how persistent operators are in terms of getting their landmen to run title, trace people down and contact them. Even if they don't have marketable title, they'll get, kind of a preemptive lease just to make sure that their bases are covered from everybody that's a potential heir. And at the end of the day, though, if they didn't have a mechanism for those that didn't sign the lease, if they didn't get 100% of the minerals leased, then they couldn't drill a well without some sort of a provision to allow them to force pool the remainder. So I guess the short answer, Tom, is not necessarily. It just really depends on the specifics. If you guys own all of the minerals between the two of you, you own half and the surface owner owns half, and they're drilling an 80-acre vertical well, and 80 acres is being pulled together, and you own 100% combined under that 80 acres. It depends on Illinois statute as to whether or not you could force pool the other guy, since you have one half of the interest. It just really depends on the specifics there. But yeah, like Justin said, worth a conversation. Maybe he doesn't want a surface location on his lands and doesn't want to sign a surface use agreement, but that can be all addressed in the actual lease. It can be a non-surface occupancy lease, and there can be separate things. They could locate the surface location in a different tract and things like that, if it's a directional well or horizontal well, for sure. So hopefully that helps. And then you want to talk about the second question you had about the mineral owners and how to find them?
Yep, absolutely, man. So for your second question, perform a title search. So these documents are public record. You can typically go into the county courthouse that they're located in. You can research these records. Some places have this available to you digitally. Some places you may have to actually physically go and check it out. Learning to perform title searches is knowledge in and of its own. And Matt has a wonderful course that can bring you up to speed on that. If you check out mineralrightspodcast.com, you'll find that course from Matt that'll take you from having a very limited knowledge all the way to how to perform a title search and how to manage your minerals. And then we also have episode 10, how to perform a title search, as kind of a place to get started. But really, it's worth the time and effort to go through a course so that you can get a foundation of knowledge to build upon. Because when you're going through a title search, if you really don't know the documents that you're looking at, it may not be very useful to you. So that's where the knowledge would really come in to be effective. And Matt, another thing to mention with this is, Tom, you might want to check with operators. Are operators even interested in drilling a well on this land? Because typically when an operator goes in, unless you're already getting lease offers, this is all calculated part of the deal for the operator. They've looked into who the mineral right owners are. They're aware they may or may not have to force pool. And it would be worth checking to see if somebody would be interested in drilling a well before you go too deep into working with attorneys or expending money. Because if nobody wants to drill, it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. Cool. All right. Well, this next one here is from Dan. He says, I recently purchased oil and gas mineral rights for about 18 acres in Pennsylvania, and it closed back in May of 2024. 2 gas wells have already been drilled, and the second gas well was completed back in mid-May. One each in the 2 units that I'm pooled with. One pooled unit is around 1,259 acres, and the other about 1,054 acres. The wells haven't been put online yet, and this was as of August of last year. The number one thing I'm hoping to get help with is similar to your experience, the change in ownership. I went through a land broker for my purchase, and they told me that they would record my deed in the county and township of purchase and notify the oil and gas operator of the change of ownership. Sounds like I better follow up with my own notification ASAP based on your experience. And then he goes on with some more details about that. Yeah, definitely, Dan, I would highly recommend confirming that that deed was recorded. And you can do that, like Justin mentioned, doing a search of the records in that county where those minerals are located, and hopefully they're online, or you can hire a landman to go and search the records if you're not there local to where those minerals are located. But for sure, if you haven't already gotten the division order and gotten the wells in pay status, follow up. Polite persistence pays is what Justin likes to always say. And I think that's great advice, because a lot of times, they get thousands of these requests, and especially if it's a larger operator, it kind of falls in the background noise. You want to make sure that you rise above that, and calling and then also emailing, I think, is the key. And the other thing too, I will say, is that once you get the name of somebody and past that initial black box that's the owner relations email address or the 1-800 number, hold on to that and maintain relationship with that person. They'll be your point of contact that you can go straight to get questions and help with. And typically that's a division order analyst that will respond to your inquiry. So definitely be persistent, and hopefully by the time you're listening to this, you've already gotten that squared away and you're getting paid. But if not, just be persistent and make sure that you follow up until you get a response.
So our next one here, Matt, is something that people go through quite often. And this is from Nicole here. Nicole says, her living mother has some mineral rights, and her sisters are looking to purchase them from their mom, essentially. And one of the properties is in Pittsburgh County, Oklahoma, that is currently producing. And they're trying to make sure that they are paying a fair market value on the property. They have a number in mind. And her question is, do I need to hire a lawyer to buy this, or can I fill out a bill of sale and then deed it into our names? Or is there more paperwork and process outside of this? She says that we do have the land description, but that's about the extent of the information. And so, Matt, this is certainly your area of expertise, and you've got some great advice here.
Yeah, this is a great question, Nicole. I would say, that just rather than putting an arbitrary number on it, just to make sure it's fair, it's always a good idea to get a quick valuation to see how much the property is worth, both the producing interest and then also if there's any undeveloped acreage or undeveloped interest or reserves. The amount that you had listed, it could be way too much or it could be way too little. So it really just totally depends on the specific situation of that mineral tract, how much life is left with those wells. When doing mineral evaluations and appraisals, you do what's called a decline curve analysis, where you can forecast the future production from existing wells. And then also we can use data from other wells that were drilled nearby to see what the value of the future upside is if there's some additional infill wells that could be drilled on your minerals. And so that's something that could all go into that evaluation. It's always a good idea to have an attorney help you draft the deed to make sure it meets the requirements to properly convey ownership and not create a title issue. If you don't do it correctly, you'll have a cloud on title that could cause issues for your heirs in the future. And so might as well just get it done right the first time. One tip that I give that you can save some money when working with an attorney is to look at other deeds that have been recorded in the county and use those as a starting point for drafting your deed. And then have your attorney review it and redline it, make any necessary changes. That'll probably take about an hour of their time versus maybe a couple hours to have drafting the deed and all the things like that. So you can save a little bit of money, but definitely get an attorney to help you draft that deed. It's only a couple $100 and it's going to save you potentially thousands down the road. And then the thing that you need to do is once you have that deed that has been properly executed, in other words, signed in front of a notary, and then you need to record it in the county where the minerals are located. All of this also is predicated on your mom having marketable title to begin with. If there's a title issue, then even if she conveys it to you and your sister, there's still going to be a title issue. So you'll need to make sure that that's all squared away. And if you have the existing deeds, you can run them by your attorney and they can help you, with that. So, that's the other thing as far as the value. There's also a nuance in Oklahoma where when minerals are sold, you have to pay a documentary stamp fee based on the sales price. And so if you know how many net mineral acres your mom owns, you can get an idea of the other interests that have been sold recently, what the price that was paid for those interests. And, all things being equal, again, it's all very case dependent. Each property is very different based on the number of wells, when they were drilled, all those things. So it can be a data point though to say, hey, for a property that's basically identical to mine, here's what it was sold for. And you can use that as another, data point in determining the value of the property. So, but yeah, if you need help with determining the value, reach out. I'm happy to provide a quick evaluation for you for these purposes, or, again, depending on the specifics, to get help from your attorney, they can also potentially help you come up with a value in a pretty quick and easy manner. So good luck, Nicole.
Absolutely. Good luck. And Matt, our next one here, this one's really an interesting one and one that we don't hear a lot about. So Melissa says, I am a landowner as well as a partial mineral right owner for a 140-acre piece of land. I've inherited land and minerals a little over 5 years ago. The world of oil and gas is overwhelming. I wanted to dig in and learn about all the moving parts, but I get very overwhelmed and give up as soon as I started. There was recently a large oil spill that occurred on an adjacent property. The oil spill did travel through my property via a creek. This prompted me to take a trip to visit the land, and I am once again hoping to learn more about what goes on so I can feel knowledgeable about the process as a whole. I've decided the most simple place for me to start is with an understanding of surface use agreements. I have a surface use agreement with a land lease oil operator. The lease agreement term is for 1 year. She says he pays a small flat fee each year for the lease. He's always been the one to provide the lease, which I have never been comfortable with. However, my head was/is so underwater with the situation that I've just trusted that he is being honest and not taking advantage. The current lease expired more than 30 days ago, and I have not received a new lease in the mail. That being said, I figured that the surface use agreement would be the most logical place for me to dive in and start learning. She goes on to say, I just got done listening to episode 23, how to negotiate a surface use agreement, but I still have so many questions. I feel completely lost. I was wondering if you would be willing to answer some questions or provide some guidance so I can feel more confident about this piece of the process. So Matt, this is a really interesting.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. And Melissa, what you're talking about with contract law and there being, some question there, I would definitely talk to an attorney that's licensed in Arkansas. So this, after some emailing back and forth, she mentioned the land is in Smackover, Arkansas. I referred her to an attorney that's licensed in Arkansas. So hopefully, Melissa, you were able to get some help from an attorney that can give you legal advice about your specific situation with, how to manage that operator, the lease. What you're talking about is unique. I haven't really dealt with that in the past where it is not held by production. So a lease, typically when a well is drilled, will be extended into the secondary term and being held by production as long as there's well that is producing and paying quantities. From the lease standpoint, from the surface use agreement, it'll also have the terms in there that'll dictate what kind of rental payments are due and what kind of damages and so forth. And so that's something that you'd have to refer back to. But it is surprising that with the existing well there, that lease or surface use agreement would expire while that well is still operating. So something seems a little bit off there. So I'd have to refer again back to contacting an attorney, getting help from them specific to your situation. But one thing I will say, based on the location of where your interests are located in the Smackover field in Arkansas, that's kind of a hotbed of activity right now for lithium extraction. And if you do have the opportunity to renegotiate a new mineral lease in the future, you want to make sure that you work with your attorney to reserve your rights to the lithium, whether that is through a different lease just for the lithium extraction, because there could be significant value there with that. So definitely check that out. As far as like all of the nuance and how the things, I would say that, a shameless plug again for my online course, but that is exactly what I, do in terms of helping you cut through the confusion and overwhelm and just explaining the different types of oil and gas interests, the different types of documents that you should have, checklists and making sure that you have copies of that. And then like understanding the context of that, how to do a title search, and then how to investigate the activity going on with your state oil and gas commission. And you can check out episode 248, which is where Justin and I walk through how to find oil and gas and lithium information for Arkansas. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. That's also a video that's featured in my course, along with a ton of other information if you need help getting that foundation to help you try to make sense of all this. And then the other thing I would highly recommend is checking out the National Association of Royalty Owners. Both Justin and I are on the board of NARO, and It's a great resource for networking with other like-minded mineral and royalty owners, and then for education opportunities, webinars. There's a lot of information about lithium and all that stuff going on, and that's going to be featured again as part of our national convention in Oklahoma City here in October. So yeah, hopefully that all helps, and yeah, good luck with everything.
You said it. And this next little continuation here is also from Melissa. But Melissa said, thanks, grateful for all the information. I didn't even know that RO existed. So for those of you that don't, I'm definitely take a look at the organization. She had one more question, which is she's always been curious as to why leases continually get passed around from company to company. She says, we'll get a division order in the mail for a specific lease, sign it, mail it back. And then maybe a year down the road, a different company is now sending us a division order for that lease. And we have to sign the paperwork again with the new company. They're constantly changing hands, and he would love to understand why. Matt, yep, this is part of it. It certainly changes hands a lot. But, what is your answer for why it is that the oil and gas companies do that?
Well, it's like any business, right? They're constantly looking to grow their footprint organically. And as soon as they run out of new people to lease, then the only other way to expand their footprint is to buy interest from other operators. And what happens over the life cycle of these wells is you'll have like a large major operator come in, drill the wells, complete the field. And then once all those wells get kind of later in their life and it gets less economic for them to operate, they have a lot of overhead. They'll look to divest that so they can reinvest in the next new thing. And then they'll have a smaller independent that'll come in that can, be very efficient in operating these wells. Maybe there's some untapped potential. They can go in and recomplete the wells and boost production. So these things happen all the time. It is part and parcel of the whole oil and gas industry, whether that is, like I mentioned before, the different life cycle in the well, or there is one operator that has an interest next to theirs and they want to expand. And then in exchange for that, maybe there's, in another field, that same operator, they have like kind of offsetting wells. And so they may do some horse trading. Hey, we'll sell you the interest in this other field for this over here because this is more strategic for us right now. We have a bigger footprint and you have a smaller footprint. And so, yeah, it just is something that's part of the business. All kinds of deals go on, and we have a lot more information in a couple of episodes, which we'll link to in the show notes. First is episode 98, which is what to do if your wells change operators. And then the other episode is MRP 154, oil and gas deals and partnerships. So there we just talk a little bit about those different types of partnerships and deals that happen. So definitely check out those two episodes. And then just a tip, that's a great time to review your lease and make sure that the new operator is crediting you with the correct decimal interest in those wells. That shouldn't change from operator to operator. That should stay the same. And then also make sure that if you have language in there that limits post-production deductions or things like that, that you aren't seeing those creep in all of a sudden. So yeah, and we have some tips on division orders and all of that, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. So good luck, Melissa.
Yeah, and great job trying to learn about this, and good luck on your other situation. Again, hopefully that our attorney was really able to give you some guidance specific to your situation. All right, our next one from Erik here says, hello again, Matt. Really enjoy the show with Justin. It's been about 19 months since my dad passed now, and I still don't have the exemption trust funded with my dad's Texas mineral rights. I am to run the trust and pay my 90-year-old stepmother the income from properties until she passes, at which time they are my property. We have significant payments in suspense now. My stepmother has worked with an attorney in California and Midland to execute affidavit of heirship for the properties we know about through operators, 4 counties so far. I've only got the docs for Haskell County, Texas so far. They show my stepmom's name and address for the applicant using the will only, and her name is the sole devisee. Now her attorney says she is ready to fund the trust, which is what I want her to do so I can start working on getting the suspended funds. Only problem is her name is on the file as owner, and I don't believe this can be changed without doing the legal work with the various counties all over again. Am I wrong? So Erik, that is a wonderful question, and it doesn't sound like you're wrong. So typically, if those were turned over to your mom's personal name in order to move those to a trust or to fund those into a trust, you would need another deed that connects the dots from the transfer from your mom to the trust, and it can be a lot of work.
First of all, our condolences on your loss. And, I would say get with your attorney. They can help you square that all away. The one thing with an affidavit of heirship is that does not perfect title, generally speaking. Again, this shouldn't be construed as legal advice, just from an informational standpoint. It is just a statement of saying, hey, we believe we are the rightful heirs, and here's who inherited these properties. They can be contested, and it's not something that is a final. So it's something that you just need to get with your attorney, whether that means filing a new affidavit or ideally, assuming your dad had marketable title, getting that trust funded, getting all those interests into the trust. Well, we'll address that, and that'll be the de facto way to convey ownership. And certainly, you don't want to do all the work and then have it go, down the path of going to, like you mentioned, other heirs that your dad didn't maybe have in mind for when he set up the trust. So again, check with your attorney. They can give you advice specific to your situation. But yeah, definitely something you might have to refile the paperwork, but it sounds like it's something worth doing to get it all squared away to begin with. So good luck.
You said it. Yeah. And one thing to add, if you don't already have an oil and gas specific attorney, that would be worth a call to an oil and gas specific attorney to compare the advice from what sounds like maybe an estate attorney. Estate attorneys are wonderful at what they do, but it doesn't necessarily mean, and you can't assume that they are well versed in oil and gas. And so it may help to bring some expertise in oil and gas specifically into that estate picture so that they can work together on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. So.
All right, Matt, our last one here for today is from Gary. Gary says, "Hi, Matt. Last week I was told by a landman that we are heirs to 500 acres of mineral rights in Freestone, Texas, due to some old 1800 deed documents, and he wants to sign a ratification. I'm attempting to find out all that I can know about mineral rights, looking for an advocate and a lawyer. There's a lot to absorb in 1 to 2 weeks." And yes, Matt, it certainly is a lot to absorb in 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And, if you still need a referral to an attorney, reach out. I can give you some names of folks in Texas that can help with that situation. But, the key thing is, like we always say, make sure you have an attorney before you sign any legal paperwork, including a ratification of a lease or anything like that. Certainly, you want to make sure that you're protecting your rights. And the other side of that equation, they're just trying to get the job done, right? They're trying to get business done in terms of getting you to ratify leases and ratify documents to get wells drilled or to get things all squared away from a title perspective. And they're trying to protect their interests, so you need to protect yours in terms of getting representation and making sure that you understand what you sign, especially if you have, an undivided interest, whatever fraction it is in 500 acres, whether it's the full 500 or even a fraction of that. If there's a lot of activity that could be very valuable, and it'll be well worth the time and effort to have an attorney that, like Justin mentioned earlier, understands oil and gas law and also estate law. And that's a very specific thing. And there's certain attorneys that work for mineral owners, others that have conflict of interest because they work for operators. And you just need to find somebody that does tailor their services towards mineral and royalty owners. So.
You said it, man. And just from face value, there might be 2 parts to this question, Gary. It may be satisfying what the operator is looking for or what the landman is looking for to ratify this lease. But another thing worth looking at is, do you have marketable title, and what would it take to get marketable title, which may be a different issue in and of itself. I think a lot of people can get tripped up, Matt, I know I was in this situation. Operators sometimes will accept documents to put you into pay status, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have marketable title or have done everything you need to really have that title solidified in your name.
Yeah, absolutely. An example of that is an affidavit of heirship, and they may accept that if it's a small interest and there's not a lot of money at stake, but technically that does not give you marketable title. So that is something to consider. And again, a good attorney is worth their weight in gold in this situation. And yeah, good luck, Gary. And, congratulations on that unexpected windfall. So, all right.
All right, Matt. Well, that wraps them up for this episode.
Yeah. Thanks again for writing in. If you have a question you'd like us to answer, email feedback@mineralrightspodcast.com. And again, all of the links to the resources we mentioned will be in the show notes, which as always can be found at mineralrightspodcast.com. Thanks again, Justin.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much for listening to the Mineral Rights Podcast with your host, Matt Sands. Don't forget to subscribe and share at mineralrightspodcast.com. The Mineral Rights Podcast should not be construed as investment, legal, or tax advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy.